I'm so sorry that I'm eating and I'm hungry, all right?
You should be. As you should be.
It sounds like peanut butter bubble gum.
It's a Wendy's chicken sandwich. It's delicious.
Fantastic, man. Fantastic stuff.
I don't really eat that much fast food.
I eat way too much, entirely too much fast food, dude.
By the way, just for curiosity, the amount of impressions that fucking tweet has gotten.
Oh, yeah.
4.5 million? 5 million?
We are right now sitting at 5.9.
Nice.
Firstly, what I'm referring to is just this very simple tweet that I did. Whoever runs the Eat the Rich account did. At like 6:30 in the morning, I'm assuming that person had their face smooshed into a pillow and was just like looked at this Forbes article that said, "Hey, the world's richest person just gave $98.5 million to help the homeless." And that person, I'm sure, was thinking, well, let's just do the math and see how much that would actually be if we put it into, fucking human figures. That's it. So all that was written on the tweet is, if you made 50 grand per year, this is the equivalent to giving away $45, which doesn't even fucking make sense. Because in my head, like, no, I like $45. No. Yes. I like $45. Yeah. Like $45 is a pretty significant amount. Like I, as a guy, 100% of the time when somebody asks me for money, or if they have a sign or something like that, I have $1 for them 100% of the time. Unless I only got a 5, in which case I don't. But if I got dollar bills, they're there. But what fucking astounds me is the amount of people that have DM'd the account angrily, because obviously one of the fucking 20 gazillion thousand retweets was like some right-wing shithead or the mentions or who the fuck knows.
Somebody big quote tweeted that negatively.
Yeah, yes. For sure.
It's impossible at this point to figure out who it was.
No way, yeah.
I would love to see Twitter really needs, like, and I've said this before, but you need to be able to go through your mentions and see quote tweets, because like if you're getting a lot of notifications and you get quote tweeted, like it's so easy to miss it, then you'll just never see it. You'll never know you'll never know where some of these people are coming into your replies from.
Yeah, but I'm just gonna read the little previews of the messages here. We'll start off with this one. Kill yourself, no one will care. You didn't take into account taxes based on your tactless tweet of Jeff Bezos. By the guy, this guy remodels and flips used Lincolns.
Cool.
Anyway.
Hell yeah.
Pretty cool.
Delete your account. You broke. Communist. Fuck you and communism. Get a job, socialist. But what's funny about this shit is like this dude's like, communism has cost 100 million people their lives, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of, I want to address that, but a lot of these people have like Joker pictures in the banners. And you want to be like, did you even fucking see the movie? Like, did you even get it? And then, so Richard Wolff had an awesome rebuttal of like, people that say, okay, blah, 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 communism, socialism has killed X amount of people. And it's like, it's a weird way to go about it because it ignores about a million things. But if in case you were really interested in talking about the death count of different political economies.
They're not. They're not actually interested in having that conversation. Right, yeah. That's the important thing to remember.
Just alone, World War I and II, which was fought over fucking different, comparative advantage and shit like that in Europe and blah, blah, blah. Like 50 to 100 million dead, just straight up in 2 wars.
Right, yeah. Not to mention, like, the entire process of colonialism.
Exactly. We'll talk about today.
You want to hear the response that you'll get to that long, very good explanation from one of these people?
What?
Venezuela much? They're eating rats, Shane. What about that?
I just ate a Wendy's burger, and I'm not entirely confident that it's not made of rats. So, like, I don't know.
Listen, you laugh, but I was once at a port, like a shipping port, and it was. This is going somewhere.
I'm sorry. I don't know why that's such a funny sentence to me. Please.
Well, I'm trying to like say it in a way that like fucking makes
I was
sense.
Hanging down at the docks as I do.
Yeah, all right. Yes.
But there was a shipment, a grain carrier that had come in, and they essentially just drop all of this grain on the ground next to the port. And the festival of rats that were climbing in and out of the grain was fucking insane. I remember seeing it being like, is the grain moving? But it was rats. Look, this is what an interconnected international supply chain looks like when you're driving towards capital efficiency rather than societal efficiency.
Sure.
Right? You're going to be eating some rat fur. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to mention here, and I've been meaning to do this for weeks, is I just wanted to put this out there to our listeners. So if you're listening to the show and you're enjoying the show, especially if you're listening on iTunes, please go into iTunes. Please subscribe. Please and please leave us a review if you enjoy what you're hearing. But especially, I'll add on that, especially if you hate what you're listening. If you're one of the people that discovered this podcast through the Jeff Bezos tweet, and you're one of the people with like sitting in a car with sunglasses or like holding a fish avatars on Twitter that's been in the podcast DMs for the past day and a half, like please leave us a review. Yeah. Each of our haters is worth 1,000 of our fans.
Yeah. Also to that same point, I want to make it absolutely clear that this entire thing has been a graduate school project for me, and none of my co-hosts are real. They're all algorithmically generated voices that I developed out of an MIT lab.
Yes.
Dwight is an amalgamation of various mentor figures from my life, including my father and some of my lovely teachers. Chris is an amalgamation of many of my favorite comedians, including Dane Cook. And I also automate the process of me speaking. This is not me speaking right now. This is a text-to-speech generator based upon my dreams.
So and if that answers your question, the guy who thinks we're all bots, please go to iTunes, leave us a review. Leave us like a 15-paragraph long wall of text in the reviews. Like,
please.
Include lots of QAnon hashtags. I'm begging you.
We will read the entire thing out on the program. If you leave us a review like that, we will read the entire thing out.
I'm surprised nobody. I hope if we have time today, I'd love to do some Curious Cat questions
for sure.
But nobody has like done any like that was outlandish or whatever. That was part of the fucking psycho right wingers, whatever. Mm-hmm. Nothing. I'm actually a bit disappointed. I was trembling as I went to click the app to open it up and see if there was going to be anything, because I was like, can my mental health handle this? And I didn't need to find out, which was nice.
No.
I meant to say, Shane, too, on the way to Philly, something struck me that was interesting, and you, coming from where you come from, might be able to relate to this. Hess trucks.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. You're familiar with this typically kind of holiday season present, yeah?
Yes, yeah.
Sure.
Hess trucks, typically, if I'm not mistaken, were oil trucks. They were like little oil tankers that you could buy. You'd buy the kids. It's like a little toy. It's a little truck, right?
Yeah. It was because Hess was like a gas station, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And they're still like an oil distributor
They've
now.
still got them. At least in Virginia, last time I was there, I believe there's still Hess gas stations.
Yeah, right.
This year, instead of a Hess oil tanker, they have a Hess tow truck.
Interesting.
Yes.
Interesting.
And I saw it, like I saw a billboard for it, and I think I saw like a advertisement online or something like that, because now tis the season now, and I was like, fucking tow truck, like they don't tow anything, like they don't have any tow trucks. Why would they do that? And it's obviously like in a reaction to like obfuscate what their actual business model is, which is fucking fossil fuel distribution.
All they tow is lies.
Yes. But I saw that and it blew my mind.
I want a little toy Tesla truck. That's what I want.
Okay, listen, I don't want to get in the Tesla discourse, but this might be a bit controversial. I don't know what the fuck you use this thing for. Like, it's like
crowd suppression.
The Tesla.
Isn't it obvious? It's clearly designed to be like a fucking human being destroyer.
Yes.
It got rejected from the first round of like concept art for the original like Terminator films for being too dystopian looking.
Yeah, Elon Musk just signed a sweet contract with the Juan Guaido government down in Venezuela. Those are going to go to the Venezuelan military down there.
I hope they do use it, because none of the armor works.
That was the thing. Like I was thinking about it, and they were talking about how this got bulletproof glass, bulletproof windows, and I was like,
well, it's a good sign if those are the features that they're deciding that they need in their rich people vehicle.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's a really good sign.
Yes. It is a very good sign, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about it, and I'm like, I've owned a handful of cars in my life, and
Mr. Aristocrat over here.
This guy.
Oh,
listen,
Mr. I have my license.
Not all of them have been operational at all times during their life cycle.
Sure.
Not all of them have had all wheels stay on the vehicle while in motion. That's another story. I've had some issues, and I'm happy to be kind of like living a lifestyle where I can divest of them. But having bulletproof windows has never really been a problem in my life, I noticed as I was thinking about it. Never has there been a point where I was just like, I'm being shot at so much, and I'm no longer able to, rely on my evasive maneuvers that I actually need for my car to stop bullets going, 6,000 feet per second or whatever it is. Don't gun Twitter, please don't correct me on that. I don't know what a fucking 223 travels at, whatever. But like, doesn't seem to be a problem.
So yeah, I would imagine that one of the people that's listening that discovered us from the Jeff Bezos tweet, they will know.
Yeah,
and they will be correcting you.
But yeah, frankly though, I think the thing looks fucking awesome. The actual look of it. Again, I'll never own one. I'll never be able to afford one. I don't know if fucking reason why anybody would need to buy that thing. But goddamn, it looks pretty cool.
The Tesla truck.
Yes.
You're serious?
Yeah.
You think it looks cool?
I think it looks amazing.
It looks like...
Anyway,
I want to hear this. I want to hear this.
Moving on.
No, don't move on.
It looks like something from the original Halo. It looks like 2001, circa 2001, like Xbox graphics.
Yeah, it looks like the Warthog or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not a graphic designer, but if I understand correctly...
Neither is whoever designed it.
But like, wasn't everything structured in like triangles? Like that's what like fucking Tomb Raider and all this shit. It's just like different triangles. They're like
awful.
The original,
awful.
The original Star Fox was all basic shapes.
Yeah, that was
and
cool.
Triangles and shit. Yeah, of course. It just looks like something from that.
I don't want to live in that reality. Do you want to live in Star Fox?
Look, I mean. It's been a long time. I haven't done. Oh God, I don't want to do a barrel roll Twitter.
Answer the question.
I
do you want to live in Star Fox?
I don't. Permanent move. I don't know. Would I like to be in like some fucking reboot style like in-game moment for a period of 5 to 10 minutes and understand what that's like? Maybe.
Dear listeners, after this episode comes out, we will release a poll from the podcast account that says, "Do you want to live in Star Fox?" Please stay tuned and give us the your feedback.
Don't embarrass me, guys. I'm pulling for Star Fox. Pulling for Star
I would like to be the bad guy from Star Fox, the giant brain.
Andros.
Of course.
Remember that very specific. I think that was like just it looked so cool. It just looked so interesting.
That part did look pretty cool.
It looked very fucking cool. And like now, like cars, I hope will be like a scourge that we view of in this planet as like they're dumb. We didn't need them. Not to say that like I don't find them compelling or interesting. I like to drive, but cars now they just all look the same. Like they're not fucking exciting to look at.
The good old days. This is like this is like the monologue that Marv does in Sin City, where he's like, "Cars these days, they all look like electric shavers."
Right? I should probably get around to seeing that film. I'm not seeing it.
No, it's good. It's okay.
Is it?
Yeah,
I don't want to piss off film Twitter now.
I'll piss them off. I can't stand them.
Oh really?
Yeah. I hate them. Fuck you guys. The Marx Brothers, they had a separate director for each Marx brother because, most of their films, they would have, these stupid, goofy setups of like, oh, there's a fancy dinner party or whatever. But like, what made those films so great is that they would just riff, but they would never stop, and they would just like keep like fucking around and like goofing off on set. So they had to have like a fucking individual director to like chase them all around and get them to.
Wow.
Nobody gives a shit. Just cut it.
That's fascinating. I was trying to remember there was one of them that was just like a slick looking dude, looked like Dean Martin, whose name was like Zippo or Chippo, like Zeppo Marx.
Zeppo, he was the untalented Marx brother who then like became their agent. He was in like the first couple films and he's really bad. He can't like act at all.
That's so funny.
Interestingly too, Groucho was originally, his bit was he was like because Chico did like an Italian caricature.
Italian racism.
And Groucho did like a German guy, and because they were all Jewish kids who grew up in the I believe just like in the East Side, Lower East Side in New York City. And so Groucho did like a German guy and Chico did an Italian guy. And then at the outbreak of World War I, like, you know, they would do like live shows, you know, vaudeville acts or whatever. And they had this whole bit set up and everybody like hated the German guy because, you know, the middle of war hysteria and everything. So he had to like drop that and come up with a new character. So he just made a new one called Groucho that's like a smartass.
Really?
Yeah, but he was originally, it was like he had a different name too. It was like Dr. Von something. And he was like an asshole German guy.
Wow.
Little bit of history, folks. You know.
Well, we got a lot of that coming up this show.
Yeah.
Nothing like some nice, light Thanksgiving listening to material when you're upstairs getting high while everybody's back downstairs.
Yeah, exactly.
Arguing with each other.
Right. We wanted to give our release a little Thanksgiving episode to give our listeners something to do other than spending time with their families. And if I may just address the viewer or the listener directly here, you know, I'd like to imagine it's Thanksgiving Day right now. You know, you've been fielding questions all day from older members of your family, like when are you going to get married? Are you ever going to have children? You know, why don't you go back and finish college? If deportation is so bad, why did Obama do it? You know, stuff like that. So you've retreated upstairs to your childhood bedroom, you know, a place that always sort of fills you with this like vaguely grim feeling of nostalgia and ennui. And, you know, maybe you're playing Nintendo 64 because it's the only console that you left at your parents' house when you moved out. Maybe you're playing Star Fox. Maybe you're playing Perfect Dark or GoldenEye. Maybe you just watched the William S. Burroughs Thanksgiving prayer video on YouTube like you do every year, you know? So but maybe if you're like me, you've listened to Alice's Restaurant a time or two already. But the main thing is that you're looking for anything, absolutely anything to keep you distracted and to keep you from going back downstairs to see your shitty family. So that's what we want to do is provide that for you. Provide you a little Thanksgiving treat here with the boys.
I'd like some ennui.
This is gonna be bad. There's plenty of that in store for me when I go home for Thanksgiving. If you think I just made any of that up, you're wrong.
Hypothetically, speaking for a friend, if when you go home, you the first thing you think of when you put your coat on the rack is that time that your mom found a glass pipe by just grabbing your coat off the rack, and you stood there like an idiot in the foyer trying to come up with the dumbest lie possible that you could when you're 16.
Yeah. Maybe you're home right now for Thanksgiving break. You've called up all your old high school friends to see if any of them want to go hit gravity bongs in the woods where you guys used to hang out. But they're like I have a wife now. I'm 32 years old. What are you talking about? It's like, oh, sorry, man. I hope you're well.
You have a little bit of wine that you've snuck away to your own room, and you go onto Facebook and you find that old high school sweetheart of yours, and you think to reach out to her, forgetting that you did the exact same thing last year to no avail, because now she has a professional life.
You open the Facebook Messenger and you see the same message that you sent her
like 4 times
a year ago. Hey, I'm in town for the weekend.
Immediately open up another tab on your browser and Google how safe is Blackberry brandy after 20 years.
You're going down. You're finding that bottle of vodka in your parents' cupboard that you used to drink out of when you were a kid, but you've discovered that it's entirely water at this point because you replaced it all when you were in high school.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Now when I was a young boy, about the age of 5, my teachers taught me I could be the greatest man alive. They told me I could change the world, be whatever I wanted to be. There was no one in the world like me. Every one of us was so unique. I'd not be an average man. No, sir, I'd be no average man. So I had those big dreams.
Welcome back, everyone, to Eat the Rich. This is a show about our political economy, late-stage capitalism, and the millionaires, billionaires, and multinational corporations hell-bent on staving off its death rattle. I'm Dwight, and we have with us Shane.
Hey!
And Chris.
Howdy, folks.
Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Shane, it's all you.
Yeah, so we thought, as we mentioned a little bit in the intro, that for this episode, we would, kind of keep it light for the holidays and just do a fun, family-friendly episode about the genocide of indigenous peoples that is masked by this weird holiday. I mean, a lot of this is well trod. I'm sure everybody has, when this episode releases, you've probably already had your stock, like, anti-Thanksgiving tweet good to go, and you've put it out there. They're like, well, actually, Thanksgiving. But, even though it's incredibly well known in our circles, I think it's a good thing to highlight, because when we talk about capitalist exploitation, colonialism is a huge, huge part of that. I mean, obviously, specifically in the United States, I mean, the entire history is based around a legacy of, brutal genocide and slavery. But more generally, like, the structure of capitalism was able to be built because of colonialism. And that's not a particularly controversial or even, like, a really leftist thing to say. I mean, there's a reason why we study history in the way we do. If you ever take like a Western history course in high school or college or whatever, the entire structure of the industrialized countries of, initially Western Europe and then later North America was built around the exploitation first and of indigenous peoples and people and resources from a variety of different land masses. Obviously, all of the endeavors of colonialism were based upon economic interests and the pursuit of those. So those histories really go hand in hand. And so what we wanted to do was kind of take a little historical look back at some of the interesting figures of the good old United States at its very beginning, because, when we talk also about inherited wealth, some of this goes all the way back to the very founding of our country, and these sort of foundational myths that we built it around. I thought it would be fun to maybe do a little kind of geographical show and tell here as well. So we have prepped some stuff from our respective home regions of the empire. So I guess I'll start off then. So, I initially, when we were looking into doing this episode, I was looking into descendants of the Mayflower, thinking like that could be an interesting approach.
Oh, yeah.
And it just turns out there's like 20...
That mental floss article is so funny.
Yeah.
Like some of the ones that are in there, like fucking like Thomas Pynchon and the Baldwin brothers.
Yeah.
The bushes.
So it turns out, much like Genghis Khan, there's like 20 million people in the United States who are the descendant of the Mayflowers, all ranging, and of course, I was like, oh, if we could find some really truly evil ones that we could do our episode on, and like the top one that kept coming up is like George W. Bush and his family. So it's like, all right,
yeah. I'm fully prepared to cancel Thomas Pynchon. Let's fucking cancel his ass, dude.
And the Baldwins.
All Baldwins at this point canceled.
All Baldwins are bastards.
All.
ABAB. So instead, we want to take a look at, the specifically surrounding like this idea of Thanksgiving. Many people know that, this holiday really became a sort of national thing after the Civil War. It was intended as this like, or around the Civil War, intended as this like healing, like sort of foundational myth. Like we need something that'll unify us and blah, blah, blah. It's really funny. And I hope we can get into this a little bit later, but for your guys' ones that we're going to talk about, like it's sort of there's like this like competing thing between like the North and the South of like who had the first Thanksgiving, like who gives a shit. But like there's this competition. And so, I was thinking like in terms of my own, history, and my own place of origin, New York City, we didn't really have a Thanksgiving, but we did have some fun, colorful characters, we'll put it that way, in the very beginning of New York's history. And so I initially started looking into Peter Stuyvesant.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure if you're not from New York or the tri-state area, how familiar you are with this person. He was the last Dutch governor of New Amsterdam, which was, as you should know, New York was originally New Amsterdam, and the New Netherlands was the Dutch colony until it was seized by the British in the mid-1600s. And Peter Stuyvesant, for whatever reason, is remembered as this great statesman when all he really did was surrender to the British. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, Stuyvesant, again,
he surrendered like a dog.
Yeah, he's a loser, folks. He's a loser. We like winners on this program. Stuyvesant's name is on a ton of things. There's a lot of areas in New York, like Stuyvesant Town or Bedford-Stuyvesant. In Brooklyn, there's a Stuyvesant Street. There's a Stuyvesant High School, which some fans of the show might know that one of us went to Stuyvesant High School.
Real heads will know this.
Yeah, I'll leave it up to the listeners to deduce that fucking mystery. And so, his name, I went to Stuyvesant High School. And the mascot at the high school was the peg legs, and that was another thing that Peter Stuyvesant had a wooden leg because he had originally been a Dutch colonial governor in the Caribbean and South America, the Dutch colonies there, and he had gotten into some small minor war, between I believe the Dutch and the British, and he'd gotten his leg blown off by a cannon. He personally took this to mean that God loved him because the cannon didn't kill him.
Oh yeah.
And so, it's a glass half full kind of guy. What else can we say about him? Deeply anti-Semitic, and considered a hero again for surrendering to the British. It's also notable that him. And one of the reasons I'm focusing on him, he was kind of this self-made man type figure, and he eventually, his progeny became this huge extended family of incredibly wealthy and well-connected politicians and businessmen in New York. There was a vast Stuyvesant fortune that became amassed over time, as a lot of these kind of, I don't know what you would call them, early adopters of the colonial project ended up becoming...
So what I'm hearing, Shane, is that this is one of the families that gets fucking dragged out of their mansions and murdered at the end of Gangs of New York or something like that. Is that on the nose?
Yeah, that's a good way to look at them.
Them and the Schermerhorns?
Yeah, exactly. They were well connected to a number of other well-known New York families in the 1700s and the 1800s. A lot of these Dutch families, like the Fish family. That's just really funny to me. There's a bunch of guys who are named Stuyvesant Fish, which is really funny. And I was trying to track down exactly who was the kind of, current day heir to this fortune. And it appears that the last guy, Peter Winthrop Rutherford Stuyvesant, died in 1970. And so, I believe he had other family, again, through these, this kind of clannish intermarriage thing between all these others. So I'm sure the money ended up somewhere, but he was the last Stuyvesant, and he died already. So, so sad for them. But interestingly, in looking through, Stuyvesant's history and trying to figure out exactly, again, because, this is a person who's really a big name. There's statues of him all over the place in New York City, and, again, his legacy is very pronounced there, and I was trying to figure out, exactly what it was about him. And apparently, and I did not know this until I was looking into it for this episode, the whole reason he was called to New Amsterdam by the Dutch is because they fired the last colonial governor, and his name was Willem Kieft. So I just want to get into him a little bit because I think he's more of an interesting character in the terms of what specifically we're looking at. So Kieft was the Director General of the New Netherlands and specifically New Amsterdam, and he's most known for starting something called Kieft's War, which was in his tenure. I think it was around 10 years. He was general there, Director General. He started a totally unprompted and unnecessary bloody war with the indigenous people, specifically a variety of the Algonquin tribes and stuff that lived in Manhattan.
No way. That never happens.
Right, exactly. Who would have thought? And apparently...
That's crazy.
For people who don't know this, again, I'm not going to get super detailed into it, but the whole kind of foundation of this particular colony was all based around fur trade up the Hudson River. And in order to do that, the traders often traded with the Indian populations there, usually a lot of the trappers were themselves natives, and then, the Europeans would set up, and specifically the Dutch in this case, would set up like trading posts and things. And so there was, there was a certain degree of cooperation going on there. And for whatever reason, this guy, Willem Kieft, was just like, no, let's just start killing them.
Jesus.
And so he used a number of these minor fights, because eventually at these trading posts, a lot of the times people would drink, and then there would be some kind of scrap, and then sometimes somebody would end up killed. And he used a bunch of these as a kind of casus belli to drum up support among the colonists of New Netherlands to go out and attack the Indians. And then a number of them later were found to have been actually intercolonial disputes. So just like two Dutch guys got into a drunken fight at a trading post, one of them killed the other one, and it just so happened that like various members of different Indian tribes were present when that happened, so he would then blame them. And in particular, I'm going to read, so this war lasted for about 2 years. It was really more of a series of kind of skirmishes and massacres. And so there was one in particular I just want to read a little passage from. One of the guys who was there, De Vries, a Dutch guy named De Vries. He's describing what the Dutch colonial force did under Kieft's direction. Infants were torn from their mothers' breasts and hacked to pieces in the presence of their parents, and pieces thrown into the fire and into the water, and other sucklings, being bound to small boards, were cut, stuck, and pierced, and miserably massacred in a manner to move a heart of stone. Some were thrown into the river, and when the fathers and mothers endeavored to save them, the soldiers would not let them come on land, but made both parents and children drown.
Jesus Christ.
So this was the Pavonia massacre. And so a number of these massacres occurred under his direction. It's purported, the exact numbers are difficult just because of, the time frame that this was happening and, the lack of records, but it's estimated at least 1,000 were killed in a series of these raids. And so the colonists themselves, except for obviously the incredibly bloodthirsty ones who were committing these acts, were incredibly dissatisfied with him, and he actually formed the first, at least in this area, the first semi-democratic council of like the various elders of the New Amsterdam colony to basically get their consent to do it. And he got these like 12 guys together, and they all voted like, no, we don't want to do this. And so he went ahead and did it anyway. And so eventually the number of the Dutch colonists, because then of course there were reprisals by the variety of, again, it was Algonquin tribes, and this of course made them unify and become like a strong confederation. And then they started going in and just like killing Dutch people and getting rid of the various colonial outposts there. So good for them. And it got to the point where so then all of the Dutch colonists were so afraid and nobody could do any of the trading that they finally got a letter back to the Dutch Indian Company, which, in many of these cases as well, and I should have brought this up earlier, but in the pursuit of colonialism, this was also like the birth of corporations, like large-scale corporations. And a lot of like early corporations were designed around these sort of trade contracts that were given to them by their crown or whatever, state they would come from to basically perpetrate and set up colonies for the purposes of generating this trade. So, colonial management was governed like a company. And as a company, and so they eventually got word back to the managers in the Netherlands, and so they're like, we gotta get rid of this fucking guy. This guy sucks. Like he's awful, right? And so they put him on a ship, and that's when they got Peter Stuyvesant to come out. And our bloodthirsty bastard Willem Kieft was on the ship, returning to the Netherlands to go basically on trial and defend himself for his actions, and he died in a shipwreck. So. Good.
Well, there's some silver lining.
Yeah. Fuck him. So that's that. Yeah, totally owned. And so so that's one of the reasons why when Peter Stuyvesant was called in, he sort of made peace there a bit in the situation. And so I guess that's in part, again, one of these like kind of, so he was seen as this great arbiter and this great like, I came in and I fixed this situation. And so again, this speaks to this kind of like foundational myth of like, colonial cooperation with the local indigenous people, and this idea of like, here's this moment of like peaceful connection and like mutually assured respect and recognition between these two different peoples, when it's like the whole reason why they even had to do that is because the previous guy was like a mass murdering fuckhead. So it kind of throws a bit of a wrench in that. I was trying to figure out if Kieft had any remaining family in the United States, States as well, sort of an extended descendants. But again, he died in a shipwreck. But yeah. A little colonial backstory to New York.
I frankly, Shane, I would wish that you could reserve some of your judgment for the red states. Okay, New York is one of the good guys.
Oh, there was last thing on the connection here, and I'm sure many people know this already. But the other thing that Stuyvesant is really famous for is building the wall for the New Amsterdam colony to protect it from these reprisal Indian raids that were happening as a result of his predecessor. And of course, that wall was at the very north end of the colony of was at the very southern tip of Manhattan. And the street along that wall was, of course, Wall Street. And so that so even in its prior meaning, the Wall Street was like a deeply evil fucking place built specifically because of this needless confrontation.
Oh man.
Generated by evil colonizing bastards.
But the beneficiaries of colonization, I mean, that all ended by the time that the Dutch colony collapsed on Wall Street, right? I mean, there was no incredible wealth concentration or generation on Wall Street after that, thank goodness.
Right, exactly. And now it's the Wall Street we all know and love that we visited.
That's right. That's right. Eat the Rich walking tour coming to you in 2020.
Yeah, it's just me spitting over and over again.
That was awesome. Shane, that was really fucking good. Jesus Christ. Fuck, that's fucked up.
Yeah, you can't find I couldn't find a picture of Keefe, but you can find a lot of pictures of Stuyvesant if you want to just ogle him.
Just include Keefe from The Righteous Gemstones, like is the that's the episode.
Yeah, that's him.
Do you want to do the Berkeley plantation thing?
Yeah, I did the research. I didn't just play Call of Duty all day. So, but we've got listeners that really want their questions answered. In the Curious Cat, I'm the only one of the three of us who cares enough to make enough time in this episode for them. So let's go ahead and move on to you, Dwight.
That's the dedication that we appreciate from you.
It's the dedication. It's the dedication to the fans.
That's right.
that only I have.
And when we launch our Patreon, that's the dedication you can expect. This definitely will never happen again.
Yeah, that's the dedication you
never
expect from me, is
again.
to absolutely shit the bed on doing research every now and then.
Everything is going to be released like clockwork.
If you give Chris a hard time for playing Call of Duty, you're disrespecting a troop. So
that's true.
Because he was playing on veteran because he is one.
That's true. I mean, I guess what I'll say about Berkeley Plantation, Dwight, you're talking a little bit about the Virginia colony as well. I mean, I guess you're going to get into it a little bit. I mean, I don't know, like, I grew up in Virginia, and like, if you grew up in Central Virginia, I don't know if it's still like this, but at least in like the 90s, like when I was in elementary school, like every fucking field trip you take is to some plantation, you know what I mean? Or like some Civil War battlefield or some sort of Confederate shit, or like to Jamestown or like to Williamsburg. So you're like they just soak you in this fucking like colonialist shit. So I don't even know. I think I've been to Berkeley Plantation, but honestly I can't remember. I mean, Berkeley Plantation, here's what I'll say, just from the fucking top of my head. They came over in fucking like 1619, I think. A bunch of fucking dumb pieces of shit like settled there. It was like an outpost of the Jamestown colony, and supposedly it's where they celebrated the first Thanksgiving, like before the Plymouth Rock Thanksgiving or whatever. But like ultimately, who gives a shit? Boring. It's a bullshit holiday. It's pagan. It's neo-pagan, and it should be abolished for that reason alone. But so, they set up the fucking plantation there. They started just massacring the shit out of the natives for no reason at all. And then like in 1622, the natives attacked them back and like wiped out 1/3 of the entire Virginia colony, which again,
Hell yeah.
I mean, owned.
Yes.
Fucking cool.
Owned.
Totally
Cool.
owned.
Kill
Yeah,
streak.
yeah, and then, if you look at the Wikipedia page about the Berkeley plantation, the things they want you to know are, what were they again, Shane? There's like, one of them is, it was the first place.
Oh,
Taps
It was the first Thanksgiving.
First place that Taps was played. Again, who gives a shit?
During the Civil War.
During the Civil War. What was the third one? Do you remember?
Oh, it was the first place that bourbon was distilled or something.
Yeah, American whiskey. Yeah, first place that bourbon was distilled. Yeah,
because it was the Jamesons took it over after the Civil War because the previous family were like slave owners who got their asses kicked. So the Jamesons took it over, and we've talked a little bit about the Jamesons before.
Yeah, so it's it's been passed down from one group of shitheads to the next. I mean, first it was the original colonists who got their asses absolutely handed to them by the indigenous people, and then it sort of fell into disrepair. And then I believe like the Harrison family of Presidents William Henry Harrison and Benjamin Harrison took it over in the 1800s, and then they fucking let it fall so far into disrepair that I believe I read that like at some point the house had been abandoned so long it was uninhabitable, and they just turned it into a barn or a stable. And then like you said, the Jameson family took it over after the Civil War, and now it's a museum where they can indoctrinate classrooms full of impressionable elementary school students from Central Virginia into the myth of the colonies and American exceptionalism and all that sort of bullshit, completely whitewashing obviously the history of slavery and the genocide of the indigenous people and all that sort of stuff.
So to cap it off, a little story here. I think something that has just to unimaginable profit for the Disney Corporation has been whitewashed. The story of Pocahontas. If we're talking about Thanksgiving, if we're talking about early colonial America, if you're from America, which I'm sure most of you are, and you think if you had a public school education like we did, there was definitely a saccharine whitewashed version of what colonial America is. I mean, the fact that there's anybody LARPing as like colonial shit in Williamsburg, Virginia, or like Sturbridge,
Jamestown as well.
Jamestown, Sturbridge, Massachusetts.
Oh my God! You mean those like weird historical Ren Fair type fucking where you go and somebody's like, "This is how we made cheese 400." Who gives a shit?
Dude.
That's not how we make it now.
Seriously, when I all through like elementary school, like middle school as well, maybe even in the high school, I probably went on like 3 separate field trips each to both Colonial Williamsburg and Jamestown. Like you take multiple trips out there.
If they're trying to freaking teach you something, and what they should be teaching you is like what we're learning right now, which is like the economic interest behind European colonies and like the New World. Instead, you're just sitting there being like, "Oh, this is molasses, and this is what a flapjack tastes like." You can try one. Like,
you want to try the butter churner?
Exactly.
Yeah. There should be like a sick house where people are just dying of like local diseases, and you can be like, "Here, do you want to feel what smallpox felt like in the 1600s?"
It should be more like a scared straight scenario for the school children, right? It should absolutely be that.
Colonialism, not even once.
Exactly. All right, but enough about that. So Pocahontas. So I'm going to read from, I was doing a bunch of research in this, and what it'll convey is just how much this poor young girl was used as a gambit to basically smooth over the tobacco industry in the new colonies for Britain, or for England. So I'm going to read from an article that was written by a gentleman named Vincent Schilling out of the Indian Country Today. Came out in 2017. It's called The True Story of Pocahontas, Historical Myths versus Sad Reality. And it just starts off with a little thing here under the lead saying, Pocahontas had a native husband and a native child, never married John Smith. So I'm just going to read a little bit of this here. Despite what many people believe due to long-standing and inaccurate accounts in history books, like fucking Disney's Pocahontas, this true story of Pocahontas is not one of a young native Powhatan woman with a raccoon friend who dove off mountain-like cliffs off the coast of Virginia. And of course, if anybody that is familiar with Virginia, there's no fucking cliffs off the coast of Virginia. The true story of Pocahontas is a tale of tragedy and heartbreak. So there's I'm just going to go through the headlines here. I don't want to go through like all let's stick on the main, the trunk and the main branches of the story here. I don't want to get too much into the twigs and leaves and stuff, but
nice tree metaphor.
Wasn't that good? Wasn't that nice?
I like that. That was good.
Yeah, I got a few in me. Pocahontas' mother, also named Pocahontas, died while giving birth to her. It's important to note that Pocahontas was born to her mother and her father, Wahun Senaka, who later became the paramount chief, which is a very important note, that she had some political sway. Her name at birth was Matoaka, which means flower between two streams, and according to Mattaponi history, was likely given to her because she was born between the two rivers of Mattaponi and Pamunkey. Due to his wife's death, Wahun Sanaka was devastated. And
so I'm sorry to
Go
laugh.
ahead.
I'm sure that the way you're pronouncing these is closer to maybe the way they're actually pronounced, but like these are all places I'm familiar with.
Fuck, I'm struggling, dude.
Like, that's not the way we pronounce. So first of all, it's the way they're pronounced by the white people in Virginia is Powhatan, not Powhatan. I'm not sure if that's even accurate, but and also the Pamunkey River and the Mattaponi. That's the way they're all commonly pronounced.
Fuck, this is going to be a long article. All right. John Smith came to the Powhatan when Pocahontas was about 9 or 10. And according to Mattaponi oral history, little Matawaka, who became Pocahontas, don't laugh, was possibly about 10 years old when John Smith and English colonists arrived to the, here we go, Senecomoca. I should have rehearsed this before. I was just like, this will be a breeze. Anyway.
You're not allowed to cut any of this.
I'm aware of this. Yes, I know. I have to be made a fool of with my fucking white tongue. John Smith was 27, and they were never married nor involved. Pocahontas never saved the life of John Smith. The children of the Powhatan were very closely watched and cared for by all members of the tribe. Since Pocahontas was living with her father, the chief of Powhatan, Wahun Sanaka, because she was the daughter of the chief, she was likely held to even stricter standards and provided with more structure and cultural training. When she was a child, John Smith and English colonists stayed near the Powhatan at the nearby Jamestown Island, but later began to explore outlying areas. Smith was feared by many native people because he was known to enter villages and put guns to the heads of the chiefs, demanding food and supplies. In the winter of 1607, the colonists and Smith met with Powhatan warriors, and Smith was captured by the chief's younger brother. Because the English and Powhatan feared the actions of the Spanish, they formed an alliance. Like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Eventually, and according to oral history and the contemporary written accounts by the Mattaponi, Wahun Sanaka grew to like Smith, eventually offering him a position of werawance, or leader of the colonists, as recognized by the Powhatan, as well as a much more livable area for his people with great access to game and seafood. Years later, Smith alleged that Pocahontas saved the life in a 4-day process of becoming a werawance. So here's the headline here. As colonists terrorized native people, Pocahontas married and became pregnant. The 1600s were a terrible time for tribes near Werowocomoco. Native tribes were once comfortable wearing clothing suitable for summer, including exposed breasts for native women and little to nothing for children, found themselves being sexually targeted by English colonists. Young children were the targets of rape, and native women in the tribe would often resort to offering themselves to men to keep their children safe.
Jesus Christ.
The Powhatan people were shocked by the behavior and were horrified that the English government offered them no protections. In the midst of the horrible and atrocious acts committed by the colonists, Matawaka was coming of age. During a ceremony, Matawaka was to choose a new name, and she selected Pocahontas after her mother. During a courtship dance, it was likely that she danced with Kokuum, the younger brother of the Potawatomi chief Japazaw.
I'm sorry to laugh. This is like
I'm usually good at this, and I'm just like
this.
angry at myself, but whatever, fuck it. She married the young warrior at about 14 and soon became pregnant. It was at this time rumors began to surface that colonists planned to kidnap the beloved chief's daughter, Pocahontas. Pocahontas was kidnapped, her husband was murdered, and she was forced to give up her first child.
Oh my God.
When she was 15 or 16, the rumors of possible kidnapping had become more of a threat, and she was living with her husband Kokum at his Potawatomi village. An English colonist by the name of Captain Samuel Argall sought to find her, thinking that a captured daughter of the chief would thwart attacks by natives. Hearing of her whereabouts, Argall came to the village and demanded Chief Japazaw, brother of the Pocahontas' husband, to give up Pocahontas or suffer violence against his village. Overcome with grief at the horrible choice, he relented with a hopeful promise that she would be gone only temporarily. That promise was quickly broken. This trade is still taught by historians. This is akin to the way that Smith traded for corn by holding a gun to the heads of the chiefs. Before leaving the village, Pocahontas had to give her baby to the women of the village. Trapped aboard an English ship, she was not aware that when her husband returned to their village, he was killed by the colonists. According to Dr. Linwood Costello, a historian of the Mattaponi tribe and the custodian of the sacred oral history of Pocahontas, soon after being kidnapped, she was suffering from depression and was growing more fearful and withdrawn. Her extreme anxiety was so severe, her English captors allowed Pocahontas' eldest sister and her husband to come to her aid. When her sister and her husband arrived at Jamestown, Pocahontas confided into her that she had been raped. Mattaponi's sacred oral history is very clear on this. Pocahontas was raped. It's possible that it had been done to her by more than one person and repeatedly. My grandfather and other teachers, this is written by the narrator here, my grandfather and other teachers of Mattaponi oral history said that Pocahontas was raped. Possibility of being taken captive was a danger to be aware of in Powhatan society, but rape was not tolerated.
Jesus Christ.
Historians differ on where Pocahontas was held, but tribal historians believe that she was held in Jamestown and relocated to Henrico to when she was pregnant. She had a son, Thomas. John Rolfe, since she had this son out of wedlock from her prior marriage to John Rolfe, prior to that marriage, the colonists pressed Pocahontas to become civilized and often told her that her father did not love her because he did not come to rescue her.
Oh my God.
Pocahontas often tore off her English clothes because they were uncomfortable. And eventually, Pocahontas was converted to Christianity and took the name Rebecca. And in the midst of her this is where it gets interesting, where we want to bring the economics to this. In the midst of her captivity, the English colony of Jamestown was failing. John Rolfe was under a 1616 deadline to become profitable or lose the support of England. Rolfe sought to learn tobacco curing techniques from the Powhatan, but curing tobacco was a sacred practice not to be shared with outsiders. Realizing the political strength of aligning himself with the tribe, he eventually married Pocahontas. Though some historians claim Pocahontas and Rolfe married for love, it is not a certainty, as Pocahontas was never allowed to see her family, child, or father after being kidnapped. Yep. After the two were married, the Powhatan spiritual leaders and family to Pocahontas shared the curing practice with Rolfe. Soon afterwards, Rolfe's tobacco was a sensation in England, which saved the colony of Jamestown as they finally found a profitable venture. This is the last part that I want to talk about, which is fucking horrific. Rumors of the colonists' desire to bring Pocahontas made its way to Powhatan, who feared for her well-being and considered an attempt to rescue her. Wahun Sinaka feared that her daughter might be harmed in that attempt. Rebecca, Pocahontas, traveled to England with John Rolfe, her son Thomas, Captain John Argall, who fucking kidnapped her, and several native tribal members, including her sister. Though many settlers were committing atrocities against the Powhatan, many elites in England did not approve of the mistreatment of natives. Oh, isn't that fucking nice? But they like the fucking tobacco, so fuck you.
Right.
The bringing of Pocahontas to England to show friendship with native nations was a key to continued financial support for the colonists. According to accounts, she realized that she was being used and desperately desired to return to her father and her son, who was taken from her. During her travels to England, Pocahontas did meet John Smith and expressed outrage due to the mistreatment of his position as leader of the colonists. After the journey and showing off Pocahontas to the English elites, plans were made to return to Virginia in the spring of 1617. She was in good health while in England and on the ship preparing to go home. But shortly after a dinner with Rolfe and Argall, she vomited and died. Those tribal members who were accompanying her, including her sister, said she was previously in good health and assessed she must have been poisoned due to her sudden death.
Ugh.
According to Mattapony oral history, many of the native people accompanying her were sold as servants or carnival attractions, or sent to Bermuda if they became pregnant after being raped and sold into slavery. Pocahontas died at age 21. And instead of being taken home and laid to rest with her father, Rolfe and Argall took her back to England, where she is buried to this day at St. George's Church, March 21st, 1617. And although the Virginia tribes to this day have requested that her remains be returned for repatriation, officials in England say that the exact whereabouts of her remains are unknown.
Ugh.
So that's the real story of Pocahontas.
So just to be clear, that this is all in the Disney movie, right?
Fuck. She was just used as a gambit for the fucking for tobacco industry, essentially.
I do want to circle back and talk a little bit about the Pocahontas Disney film. But before that, I just want to point out, and this is like, one of the takeaways here, that this whole like foundational myth shit about the beginning of this country that is so wrapped up in the holiday of Thanksgiving, if you look at it plainly for what it was, right? Like the American colonies that were set up were based upon, the obvious, like, the rape and murder of the indigenous population, slavery, of course, but then even more so on top of that, like the product that was the goal that they were seeking here, right? The ultimate like profit seeking thing was like an addictive carcinogen, right? Like
Yes.
That's what this country was founded on, was like getting people hooked on a drug that will kill them. And in order to pursue that, the wanton rape and murder of the indigenous population and using them as they saw fit, all of which is in the Disney film.
So I've been wanting to like talk about this concept for a while, and I will never be able to truly express it properly. And this should be an entire show, like an entire other show should be dedicated to this concept, which is of decolonization. And to express it, I mean, decolonization, simply put, is an undoing of the power structures of colonialism. And there are many ways that obviously like this can play out, like the rights of indigenous peoples and the profits from the resources of stolen land actually going to the people that inhabit it. Or just more generally, just honoring the basic human right of self-determination. And I mean, from the few stories that we talked about today in honor of our federal holiday here, Thanksgiving, America has been involved in human rights abuses through its entire invisible colonial empire since its inception. I mean, just simply fucking put, there's no way around saying that this country, it was built on stolen land with slave labor. And although slavery was abolished 150 years ago, that's not even a fucking long time. That's like 4 or 5 generations. And it's not even like the entire apparatus that was there to disenfranchise the rights of black people in order to create and extract as much labor value as possible from them and disallow them from organizing. That never went away, really. It was just changed legalities. And it's still, that's why we have to decolonize it. And it's another fucking example of American colonization, which I don't think a lot of people talk about or know about, or it's at least not talked about enough. But between 1930 and 1970, 1/3 of Puerto Rican women were forced sterilized by the United States government. At the time, it was the highest rate of sterilization in the world.
Jesus Christ.
So the American colonization and subjugation of indigenous people is palpable. And there's a lot of inobvious ways that it plays out too, like, Eurocentric beauty standards and like shaming of Afrocentric hair.
Or repeating that violence or whitewashing that violence via fucking movies like Pocahontas.
Exactly. Which they still fucking make profit of.
Literally, when I was in elementary school, when I was taught the history of Pocahontas, I was taught the version from the Disney film.
Yeah,
Jesus Christ,
for sure.
That, you know what I'm saying? Like, it was like, I remember it was before the Disney film even came out. Like, the Disney film came out when I was in elementary school, and that was the story that I knew, and I never thought anything different of it at the time. That was literally what my teachers said. That's just like the popular mythology of it.
Or like when a demoralized the underpaid public school teacher is like too hungover to do their lesson, and they just like put on the movie for the day or whatever.
I just on the topic of the movie, there was one specific thing that I wanted to get out, which is like, I don't really remember the film very well. I saw it when I was a little kid, but there is this one of the more heinous things that even at the time I remember being like, that's a little fucked up. Like, not even, being like a young kid and not really like even understanding how much of like a whitewashed history that was and everything. But there's a song in it when I guess like tensions are rising between the colonists and the tribes, and like the song is like Savages, right? And so the whole idea is that it starts off where it's like, and it's supposed to be like it's supposed to read as like a critique of racism, right? Because it's like the bad colonists, like the villainous colonist people are the song's like savages, something, like they do this or they, and so it's like they describe what the cultural things of like the other side are. But then, so it's like, so this is supposed to be like, here we're gonna like allow a certain amount of critique of like, the inherent racism in the approach of, this sort of like warmongering the colonial settlers. But like, then it flips over to the native tribes people, and like they're singing the song too about how the colonists are savages, and so it's like literally it's both sidesing the genocide of the indigenous people. It's like, well, racism is real, and sometimes even reverse racism. Like, the tribes people probably thought the colonial people were savages too, and that, they let that get to their head. It's so awful. It's such, I don't know how we ended up targeting this fucking movie on this thing, but it sucks. It's a bad movie.
I mean, I think like anybody with any like marginal liberal sensibility has a pretty clear idea or good understanding of who the oppressed people are from our colonial system. Like, I think you could point that out and be like, yes, run-of-the-mill Democrat could be like, yes, we understand that there's problems with race inequality in this country and shit like that. But at least we make an attempt to do on this show is be more open. What I think we need to do is be more open about who are those that benefit from colonialism. Like, what's the flip side of it? And in colonialism, namely, white people in the Americas and the global South are beneficiaries of this colonialization, right? Like, who were the beneficiaries of colonialization in the case of in the Virginia colony was the fucking capitalist colonists who were trying to turn a profit, and people in England who wanted to fucking smoke. So and those same people who are the beneficiaries of this are now the people that I think need to do the most legwork in the goal of decolonization, right? If you're going to be the beneficiary of it, you have to undo that if you're at all interested in equality. And I think what's interesting too is, like, not unlike feudal systems that existed before capitalism took hold over the last 150, 200 years or whatever and became the global dominant political economic system. Like, we have to ask ourselves, like, how different is it from passing down this beneficiation from lineage? Like, why the fuck does Meghan McCain have a job when she sucks? Why was Hillary Clinton a major party candidate when her spouse was president like 20 years earlier? Why is George W. Bush a free man? like,
I ask myself that every day. At a specific time.
That's fine. It's fine. I know my way around Twitter terms of service well enough by this point to know that as long as you're only alluding to it, it's fine.
Oh, okay. Yeah, great. I mean, Shane, you were alluding to this, but like the colonial powers who just rape and pillage resources from the New World and Africa and Asia and shit were just driven by this mad dash towards capital efficiency, which is fucking the same today. We're just better at it. And in a different iteration of what we now see, which is like multinational conglomerates. Like ExxonMobil as a corporation literally has their own foreign policy agenda.
And I mean, again, the whole basis of the idea of like an international corporation comes out of colonialism.
Yep.
I mean, I would love at some point, maybe in the future, to do an episode on the British East India Company, and it's just like gigantic, multi-continent drug empire.
The point of like the roots of colonization is just, it's so deep. And the brutality of the inequality that it caused and we fucking live under today sowed the fucking seeds that sprouted now as like fascism and climate change and all this existential problems that we have to, that are now coming out as the global unrest we see today. And Shane, something came into my mind. You introduced me to this, which is Billy Bragg's version of the Internationale. And my favorite line from it, which is where he says, "Freedom is merely privilege extended unless enjoyed by one and all."
That's right. That's right.
And unless we make a conscious effort on an everyday basis to decolonize the colonial power that we live under, then we're fucked.
And you, dear listener, can start that process by, as soon as you finish listening to this episode, go back downstairs, talk to your MAGA uncle, and get into an argument with him. Make him feel bad.
But actually. Actually. We like to try to take the opportunity when we can to answer some of the curious cat questions that we put out because
staying in, staying in.
God damn it! You know what I think the problem is? Like I have the noise canceling headphones on, so I can't really hear myself talk and whatever. That sounds like an asshole. Whatever. It's just my insecurity.
It's every time you try to like say something that you've like prepared or thought about, even just like a second. You know what I'm saying? Like when you're just winging it, you're fine. But like if you've like, even if it's one sentence that you're trying to say a way that's exactly how you want to say it, that's when it happens.
Yeah, cool. So I was winging it there, so I'm just a fucking idiot. Anyway, so
oh, I see.
So we'd like to do some curious cat questions if we can. If we have a little bit of time at the end of the episode, or we just run it long so it goes like to a fucking 2.5 hour long episode, whatever. So I'd like to let's just go through some curious cat questions here. And this one,
let's do it.
This one popped out to me, and I like it, and I'm gonna get canceled for not saying this word correctly. Have y'all radicalized any family members?
Absolutely not.
Well, I have a long con working on one of my family members. I'll just say it like, there are certain people, like, I don't know if this is too unique of a circumstance, but like my dad is a guy who he'll watch Fox pretty much constantly and will repeat like, right-wing talking points and, but he doesn't really have, like, in the middle of a moment, and he does watch it every day, like constantly, he doesn't have like a strong commitment to these ideas, because I think at the end of the day, for him it's just like performative anger, and he, likes to get mad or whatever. And so if I sit down and talk with him, I can like, convince him of like very basic like leftist overtones and critiques if I frame it a certain way, and he'll be like, oh yeah, and then he'll like go straight to watching Fox. But so that's been very frustrating. It's been going on and off, and I mean he's just old. I think that's part of it, but like I think like the way that it pays off is like on election day I just call him and tell him who to vote for. Yes. So in that regards, with some of your family members, if you can leverage that kind of like power over them, at the end of the day, if they're not really engaged in other forms of political activity, especially if they're older family members and they probably don't really even leave the house too much, like
take their ID out of their wallet, hide their ID before they go to vote,
vote with their ID.
Yeah.
No voter fraud.
I guess for me,
no voter fraud.
What?
No federal
that
charges.
Sort of reminds me a little bit of kind of my situation with my mom. Like my dad is like lifelong Republican. Has told me on several different occasions, I believe, that like the greatest moment to him in American history that he can remember his lifetime was Ronald Reagan's "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall" moment. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the kind of thing that gets him all like teary-eyed and nostalgic. So like he's sort of like a lost cause. There's no even swaying that. But my mom, however, is I think sort of like the textbook case of just like Fox News boomer brain rot disorder. You know what I'm saying? Where she was like a lifelong Democrat, and then actually loved the Clintons all through the 90s, voted for Bill Clinton, voted for Al Gore, voted for John Kerry. And then Obama came along, and it's hard to put my finger on, but there was just something about Obama that I guess she didn't like too much. Yeah. It's like, I don't want to, it's hard to say for sure, but she didn't like Obama, and then she spent 8 years just basically vegging out to Fox News, 24 hours a day. And then in 2016, she voted for Trump. However, she told me that, she always liked Bernie Sanders, and that if Bernie had been the nominee in 2016, who's to say, but she absolutely wasn't going to vote for Hillary Clinton. You know what I'm saying? And and as you were saying, Shane, like in my discussions with her, we talk about politics a lot. We always have. And she is, if I present sort of these, leftist ideas in a sort of way that can appeal to anybody, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like if I frame them in the right way, it's very easy to get her agreeing with them. So who's to say if it came down to, a Trump Bernie Sanders election, she'd probably still vote for Trump, but she's,
I don't know, man.
Bernie Sanders has that kind of appeal, that kind of populist appeal to a lot of people that, you know what I'm saying? I could potentially see people voting for him. I could see my mother voting for him, but who's to say? But as far as the rest of my family, my extended family, like my family down in Georgia and Florida, no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. They're like Charlie Kirk, Ben Shapiro, loving.
Oh, Jesus.
Like all the way, man, all the way. That's a topic I can't even touch it.
There's a non-zero chance that some of your extended family are the ones who have been like sending those like veiled death threats to our podcast account.
Yeah.
Oh, buddy.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna read it before bed. But I think
I want to read them all, man.
No. You don't.
I do, though.
I think I know you do. I think both of you are touching on something, because I maybe you'll break with me on this, but like I think that we do have a duty as those that have kind of crossed over and understood now what our material benefit is by organizing as a global working class, that I think we do need to venture and have these potentially initially uncomfortable conversations with our friends and relatives about this. You guys are so right. Like when you frame things in the context of like, well, liberals suck. Like that's helpful.
Right.
Like, yeah, that's always a winner. Yeah.
But like, and maybe this is timely, especially coming in for Thanksgiving, when you are going to be maybe around some relatives that differ with you politically and you haven't seen in a while, I always find that like having that initial commiseration is your foot in the door. Because there's like in like
everybody sees there's wealth inequality. Everybody understands those basic sort of things. You know what I'm saying? And most people, if they're really honest about it, would like to see everybody have free health care.
So there's like two approaches to like negotiation or something, which is like foot in the door versus door in the face. And I think the foot in the door thing works really well. It's like you can say like, hey, we can both agree that liberals suck and that like liberal values have brought us to this and everything sucks, right? Like, and you'd be like, well, yeah, you know what? You're all right. And, you know, Hillary Clinton is a demon or whatever the hell they want to say.
Also true. Also true.
She got me banned for 12 hours and I'll never forget it.
Another name on the Clinton kill list.
That's right. I've never even sworn on the timeline. Anyway, but I think we do have a duty to reach out and have these conversations and just put it to them simply and play towards their material benefit. Take it out of politics because like everybody is hyper political whether or not they follow the news. If you sell your labor to your employer, you're doing politics, right? We are all engaged into the political economy. And I think that there was a very pointed effort to try to divorce politics from economics after the New Deal,
of course,
right?
Yes.
So we don't think that the two are inherently intertwined. Talking economics starting with the economic benefit of your relative or your friend or something to say like, hey, can't you agree that, you know, we make the rich rich and that we are the ones that are putting in the effort and driving the forklifts and the trucks and you know, doing the grave night, the
graveyard shift.
Jesus Christ. You know, as a nurse and shit like that, like we are creating the value. So why do they get to keep it in their bank accounts? And it's like, yeah, you're goddamn right. There is no war but class war. And so going with them on that, unless they're fucking rich, in which case fuck them and like steal their shit in their house while you're there for Thanksgiving. But, like, or at least
there we go.
Drink all their booze and like don't flush the toilets. But that is the in. Because I truly believe that like people from an early age are these perfect computers of cost-benefit analysis. And it may not be obvious what their cost and benefit is because even bad behaviors are continued because they had worked for somebody previously in the past, right? So go with the class struggle. That's the way to do it. And I do think that we do have a responsibility to spread this awareness.
The last thing I'll add to this, and this is, you know, my own calculation and people may not agree with it or whatever, but I do think like that there's a lot of focus sometimes on this idea of, you know, like trying to convince people, right? Like, you know, people who disagree with you that like your side is correct or whatever. And I understand the impulse towards it. And I would just say it's like, it's a very contextual kind of thing. And it involves like a great amount of effort, right, to be put into that, like especially if you're talking about like a family member who's like intransigently like, you know, right wing or something. At the end of the day, you can kind of sort people in your life who you know aren't necessarily like politically active into a few different categories, and I think, you know, there are people who are like on the fence, you know, that like might be receptive to these ideas, and then there are other people who are just like totally ideologically opposed to you for whatever reason. And at some point, I mean, you know, if you have a variety of reasons to like have relations with people in your life, and not all of them have to be centered around a certain kind of politics. And there's some people where it's just like, well, I'm just not going to convince them. And even though it might seem really important to do it, or, you know, it has a certain emotional weight because there's somebody you care about or they're in your family, right? It's like the question is like, how much effort is this worth? Right? Like what am I really going to get out of this? And the amount of time that I spend like arguing with somebody that, you know, some dipshit cousin or something who like at the end of the day I don't even really like that much, versus, you know, putting that effort into connecting with people who are on the fence and kind of introducing them to a certain kind of, you know, category of critique or whatever, or like even better yet, you know, connect with the people who already do agree with you.
Yes.
Like I think that like a big portion of it is, you know, there are plenty of people who have started to become more in line and more activated on these leftist politics. Hook up with them, you know, talk to them.
Organize.
Yeah, organize. Like, and you know, continue to educate yourself as well, right? Like,
Shane, to your point too, when we were talking whatever episode that was about Mars attacks.
Oh yeah.
About how like at some point there is just no getting to know your enemy, which is going to create any like common ground.
Exactly.
To that point,
Yeah.
too, if you are in a conversation with somebody and you feel comfortable and you're able to, and they say something like fucking, refugees don't deserve the resources we even give them when we jail them to like 45 people to an 8 by 10 space, fucking call them out on that shit. Make them feel fucking uncomfortable for saying some bullshit like that.
Yeah, exactly.
That is on the other side of the coin. That is the other thing that you can do, is that, yes, you might not be able to convince them to express it like, the democratic rule and self-governance of the global working class is what we need. But if they say some shit that's some fast shit, fuck them up.
Yeah, exactly.
Make them deeply uncomfortable. Make them think about that. Make them think about that on the drive home.
Yeah, like there should be a social cost to expressing certain kinds of cruel ideas, right? And I think that's one of the ways you can do that, right? Is like you might not necessarily convince a racist person to not be racist, right? But like you could make it clear that like that's not going to be welcome,
right?
Like that, that those attitudes are not going to be acceptable to express to you. And again, it depends on like obviously a lot of this is also dependent on your like age and your relation with like your family members or whatever and how much you really care about them. Again, I'm not going to get into how I personally feel too much because I'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Before we get weirdly actual.
Host your own Thanksgiving, and then you get to control who shows up. That's what I'll say. Create a Thanksgiving echo chambers. That's what I'm in favor for.
That's right. Okay, here's a good question. Another y'all. What's the first time y'all realized, oh shit, the rich are deeply, deeply vile?
I don't know if I have one specific moment, but I do remember like when I was younger, getting like when I was in school, right? Like getting made fun of for not having as much money as other people, or like not having new shit or whatever the trendy thing is and not having that. And then also seeing that reverse when I got into like college and everybody like who also again had more money than me was then playing the game of like, oh yeah, I grew up rough and this, that, and the other, like seeing that weird reversal through like school relations of like, when you're in elementary school, kids will bully you for being poor, and then those same kids will grow up and pretend that they were poor or whatever.
Right.
That was sort of like I guess in a certain way, like a pre-political just distaste of people who came from things.
Well, I can remember, I don't think that I have any one particular experience either with like any singular person, but like sort of like what you were saying, I can remember like being a little kid one time and our power got shut off, I believe, because we were late on the bill or something, because like my dad was in sales, and it's like can be, as anyone in sales knows, it could be feast or famine. You might not have money for, a lot of times we were sort of skating by, and there's no guarantee that when you're gonna have money coming in. So I guess we were late on the bill or something, and the power went out, and it was only for a day or two, I believe, not even 2 days. But I was young enough that like that struck me. It never even occurred to me that sort of thing could be possible. You know what I'm saying?
Right,
like why? Like who is this like giant force over top of us that has the ability to do this? To like now we have to worry about, is our food going to spoil? We can't cook. You know what I'm saying? Like all these sorts of things.
Yeah.
That was the first time I really like think I felt like that like great other that's more powerful than me. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Just because of economic reasons.
Where did this go? A lot of this. Oh, how do you determine who to cover from week to week? I don't know. Whoever sucks.
That's the good thing about this show, because we'll never run out of material.
Oh God, no. Well, I mean, hopefully, ideally, when we have like our fucking socialist utopia, but until then, geez.
Yeah. We're gonna literally run out of people to cover.
Yeah,
in real life.
I'll say to that one that even if we do achieve some kind of equitable socialist utopia, I will be sure to find things to complain about and have a show about it. So.
All right, here's a good one. Is Bruce Wayne a good billionaire?
No. Next.
Absolutely not.
There is no such thing. Oxymoron.
It's
Next.
so funny,
Bruce Wayne flew on the Lolita Express. His name is on the flight logs.
Absolutely.
It's so funny because it's like Batman is such a pile of shit. He doesn't get enough satisfaction from subjugating his entire city and being a billionaire and employing most of the city that he literally stays up until all hours of the night just beating the shit out of the working class.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
He sucks.
Fuck Batman.
Yeah.
His whole family sucks.
Yeah, well.
They got what was coming.
His stupid butler sucks too. Idiots. All idiots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the best way to actually inspire people to do shit?
When someone figures it out, please inspire me to do something.
Well, Well, I mean that's a really vague question, right? Like, there's all different metrics for what qualifies as doing something and inspiring people. I think this is similar to the radicalization question again.
Yes.
I think that the reality is, and I might have some disagreements from you guys and potentially some of our listeners for saying this, but the reality is, to get anything done socially, you don't necessarily even need the majority of people to be on board. That's just the truth. Like,
right.
in a variety of different situations, even in like a nominal democracy, I mean, you're talking about a plurality of votes is what you need, right? Not even like a majority, and that's already within the small subset of people who are actually bothering to vote, right? I mean, even if you look at like, more extreme versions of like revolutionary activity, like they're often carried out by like relatively small groups of people. And so it's less about, necessarily getting like a critical mass of, like everybody assembled and on the same page, but it's more about just the people who are committed to doing something or, affecting a certain kind of social change to be incredibly motivated. That's what it is. And so that's why I think that, like, I mean, this gets into a slightly different topic, and I'll try to be brief here, but, there's times when there are certain types of, like, kind of low effort or low scale propaganda that we all engage with all the day long, just like on Twitter or whatever, shit posting. And, there's a very basic critique of that is like, oh, aren't you like preaching to the choir, right? When you say certain things, and it's like, well, yes, part of that, but that's like a good thing. Like, you want to keep the people who are, politically on your side, like, you want to keep them engaged. And part of it as well is about like, and what I hope at least in part this podcast does is to provide people with some educational tools in terms of like, learning a little bit of something, or, providing an avenue to learn more about specific elements of the things that you're critiquing and specific approaches, right? So like, look to inspire the people who are already interested and motivated and want to do something. I think sometimes people can focus on, and I understand why, but we focus on like the people who are disaffected and not interested in doing anything, and like they're always going to be there in some form or another, even if it was like in an imminent revolutionary scenario where there's like fucking people are storming the gates or whatever. There's always going to be people who are like, who don't give a shit, and so you can't focus your attention there, although sometimes it can be very depressing to look at it that way.
You know what it reminded me of was like, if you stand up above an ant colony and you look down at it and you're like, wow, look at this fucking incredibly elaborate labyrinth of coordination and like, just going the places where the resources are and bringing it back like totally efficiently. And it's just this, how do these basic creatures create something that's so efficient and good and organized in a social manner? But then when you like zoom in, if you like to just get close and focus on one ant, they're just like bumping into shit and like touching the other ant, like touching antennas, switching pheromones and shit, and then going the other way and like not even carrying something, walking past a thing that could have been helpful. It's like when you look at it from a macro level, it seems all the more coordinated, and when you look at it from a micro level, like it's not as much so. But like, if you're doing your part and you are putting in the effort that you are able to, like, it sums up to a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
And yeah, Shane, I'm totally with you. Like, it takes a lot less than we think.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
If we think about like the labor movement, if we think about the 1800s and the Haymarket Massacre, like that wasn't the entirety of the country that was able to get labor rights to go for an 8-hour workday or in a 5-day-a-week work schedule. Do I think that we need to go to a 4-day-a-week work schedule? Fuck yeah. How much more efficient would you be if you only had to work 6 hours a day or 5 hours a day or 4 hours a day? We all know this. Like, it's this bullshit performative thing that we have in this weird American workplace. Like, it doesn't take any grandiose, huge movement. It takes some extremely effective punctuations.
I mean, the flip side of that, I mean, and you can look at the way that like the powerful already rule the world. Like, small groups of people do massive things all the time.
Hell yeah.
That's like, that's the other way to look at it, right? Like, the amount of people that we're talking about in terms of like the ruling class is like incredibly small compared to the rest of the population, and yet they can manage to run everything. I mean, of course they run it into the ground, but like like well, I mean, like the Cuban Revolution was like 12 guys on a boat.
Okay, last question here. It says, kind of hard to read. It says, "Stay cool, folks."
Okay. All right, stay cool, everybody.
I want to give one last word.
Please.
You know, you're probably listening. This is you're either driving to your Thanksgiving and you have this on in the radio, or again maybe you're already there. Maybe you're upstairs and just sort of zoning out and ignoring the just collected misery of your fucking extended brood in the arguing over like the placemats or whatever downstairs. And I'm just gonna let you guys know that we're here for you. We're here.
Hell yeah. Goddamn right. There's only one place you can go to hear this. And it says...
It's patreon.com/eattherichpod.
That's for tomorrow. Stay cool, folks.
This song's called Alice's Restaurant. It's about Alice and the restaurant. But Alice's Restaurant is not the name of the restaurant, that's just the name of the song. And that's why I call the song Alice's Restaurant. You can get anything you want at Alice's Restaurant. You can get anything you want at Alice's Restaurant. Walk right in, it's around the back, just a half a mile from the railroad track. And you can get anything you want at Alice's Restaurant. Now it all started 2 Thanksgivings ago. It was on 2 years ago on Thanksgiving when my friend and I went up to visit Alice at the restaurant. But Alice doesn't live in the restaurant. She lives in the church nearby the restaurant in the bell tower with her husband Ray and Facha the dog. And living in the bell tower like that, they got a lot of room downstairs where the pews used to be. And having all that room, seeing as how they took out all the pews, they decided that they didn't have to take out their garbage for a long time. We got up there, we found all the garbage in there, and we decided it'd be a friendly gesture for us to take the garbage down to the city dump. So we took the half a ton of garbage, put it in the back of a red VW Miner.